Nice.
Hello guys, welcome to a Christian atheist debate. My name's Neil, I'm an atheist.
I'm Andrew and I'm a Christian.
Hi, I'm Alexi, and I used to be an atheist, and now I'm a Christian.
I didn't know
The
that.
topic we're discussing today is why God chose 2,000 years ago as the date to spread his message in Christianity, rather than just starting out with the message and stopping just everybody before that point of them not knowing what to do to get into heaven.
Big topic.
Sorry, I didn't
Same.
catch that.
Oh, did you not hear?
Oh, no, what Alexi said. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh yeah, he was cutting out.
Oh, sorry, is my connection not very good? Let me know. We'll see how we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Ooh. I just said it was a big topic.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so shall we have one of you start off as to why you think God took so long, because you're both Christians?
Andrew, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think something important to keep in mind is that God does everything in his own time, which I know sounds like a bit of a silly answer, but that is a reality when you even if you go through the Bible, the timeline, you do see a trend of long waits as well, not just for Jesus's arrival. So I guess that's the first thing to kind of realize, that God does things on his own time. If he is all powerful and all God, he calls the shots for when he wants to do everything.
Sorry. Yeah, continue. Sorry.
So I think that's quite an important thing to know before that. We can't really it's harder to view it the way God would, in a way.
Sorry guys, it kept ringing. All right, so why would God decide to just do it in his own time rather than just starting out letting everybody have the option to go to heaven? Why did he just make them just not know what they need to do? Doesn't that seem unfair of a God?
You go for it, Andrew.
Well, I think God's message was spread before that as well. It just wasn't through Jesus. There was still a part of his plan being fulfilled, and so yeah, it's not that Jesus was the first one to tell them about God and all that. There was people before that prophesying about Jesus's arrival. There was so many prophecies that ended up becoming real after that, that were about God and about Jesus. So I think even before Jesus's arrival, there still was that moment where the message was being spread as well, but it just wasn't Jesus who was spreading it.
I would disagree with that.
That about the message being spread?
Yeah, before.
Yeah, why is that?
Depending on where you were born in the world, it was most likely the case that you didn't know, that you're most likely part of some sort of, I can't remember what it was, when you have multiple gods, or I can't remember what the term for that is in the Bible, but I'm pretty sure that's a crime in the Bible. And most likely, wherever you were in the world, you're probably part of some religion that was that had multiple gods, and the message was not really there, in my opinion, unless you've got some counteracting evidence to show me.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. And I think like back then it was definitely hard to get the message around anyway because not everyone spoke the same language. So like especially depending on where you were born, it probably was really hard for you to receive that message anyway. Um, I do know that when Jesus came back, the Roman empires they made like roads and they had a common tongue that they spoke in. So I think when Jesus came back, that was like one of the easiest times for his message to be spread because a lot of more people spoke the same language. So I do agree, like before that, it was probably like a lot harder to spread it around anyway.
But even now, you just most like, isolated tribes and some people in poorer countries, they just might not know about Christianity still. Back then, barely anyone knew, so it doesn't really not without being exposed to Christianity and what are considered the rules of Christianity, let's say, then you don't really know what to do and how to avoid sinning because culture might have different rules to what Christianity has.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you're right. There's, there are people with different opportunities. But I guess even if you know about Jesus, you have no way to avoid sinning. We're all sinful. So we all deserve, in the Christian, we've all kind of put two fingers up to God. And so we all deserve God's judgment, wherever we are in the world. And I guess the question is like, it's amazing that anybody gets rescued. So I suppose I'd ask the question, why should we all be entitled to equal opportunities in this regard, when actually globally, the reality is there aren't equal opportunities in almost every other sphere of life.
Because your premise is starting out with the fact that God is unfair.
But what do you mean by fairness?
Fairness, I'm going to say giving everybody the option of getting into heaven. I'm going to call that fair.
But why?
Because in Christianity, a lot of the things that are considered sinning would not be intuitive, or you might not know what's a sin versus what is an acceptable action, because a lot of them are arbitrary or weird sort of rules that you really have to know the specifics to follow it.
Definitely. And even Christians who read the Bible don't follow all the rules. I don't follow all the rules of the Bible. I'm not perfect. I suppose there's one simple thing that does save us, and that's by believing in Jesus. I guess I'd say Christianity basically isn't fair. So I'd just say that argument that God's unfair doesn't really stand, because Christianity basically says it's not fair. Like, what's fair about Jesus dying for me?
But then
like,
my argument does stand.
Wrong. Sorry?
But then my argument does stand, because you just said my argument doesn't stand that God is unfair, but then you just agreed with it.
Well, I suppose it's the objection against Christianity doesn't stand. It's like saying, I object to Christianity because it's unfair. But that's like saying, I object to Christianity because it's got Jesus in it. It's like, well, it does. That's part of the system. Christianity is inherently unfair because Jesus dies. Jesus is good, and he dies for people who are bad. Like, what's fair about that?
Yeah, I think it makes me think a bit like, if I'm born into like Christian household, I'm a Christian my whole life, and say I get into heaven when I die, and then someone repents like on the last seconds of their life and they still go to heaven. Like, I can say that's unfair because, I believe my whole life that person didn't and repented on like you know, their last seconds of their life, but it's not, neither of us deserve it anyway.
If everyone's just going to hell, why even bother with anything?
Well, because we're not going to hell if we believe in Jesus. So why bother with anything? Because
Wait,
Jesus.
Didn't Alexi? Didn't you just tell me that nobody can follow all the rules?
But the conditions for going to hell are believing in Jesus or not. So if you believe in Jesus, then you're united to him, and you go with him to heaven.
Are you saying that you could be gay and then go to heaven because you believe in Jesus?
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends who are attracted to people of the same sex, and they believe in Jesus, and they go to. I firmly believe they'll go to heaven. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's what the Bible says. You know, no matter what our hearts desire, if we believe in Jesus and we say sorry for those wrong desires, then 100% certainty of heaven.
Then what's the point of sins and all of that? What's the point of writing that this is a sin if it doesn't really matter in your judgment?
Oh, go on, Andrew. I'll throw in a friend to you. That's a hard question.
What was the question? I didn't understand it. Sorry.
So Alexi says that sins don't really matter because you just need to believe in Jesus, and that's your deciding factor on going to heaven or hell. Then why even bother with the rules for what's a sin or not? Why don't you kill people and then you believe in Jesus? Because it's not gonna. If it's not gonna make me go to hell, then none of those matter then.
Well, I believe that we will be judged on the sins that we have done and our actions and everything. We are like held accountable to those things. But what I was gonna say, so I do think that we are judged because of the sins that we do as well. But then if you go into depth and you have certain issues with one sin, you can see that there is a reason why that thing is wrong. You know, like if you get rid of a sin in your life, you're sacrificing something to have a purer soul, you know, so there is meaning in like letting go of something if it is sin.
Yeah,
and it's probably important to clarify there that sort of idea that God still cares, and he does sort of, I like that phrase Andrew said, we're kind of held accountable in one way, because just like in a relationship, you know, we talked about that family relationship and
if you commit a
friendship relationships.
If you commit a sin and you can go to heaven, then what is the point of a sin as a concept?
I guess the point of sin, and this for me was a bit of a head scratcher. I think I'm still struggling to get my head around it. But in God's plan, sin was there to make us feel bad so that we turn to Jesus and ask for a relationship with God.
Sorry, so God's just guilt tripping you into...
Wait, what's so funny about that? Yeah, I think as we understand we're guilty and we understand what that means in terms of the punishment we're heading for, like we can turn around and say sorry, just like, you know, at school, you know, as I realize my teacher doesn't want me to be writing on the desk and they kind of look at me like that. And then I realize, oh my days, I've completely vandalized this desk. I go, oh, please don't give me detention. You know, that is teaching me discipline. Like the school teacher doesn't care that much about the desk because it could be wiped off by a cloth and some water.
God doesn't care that much about sin then?
He cares a lot because he cares about us. He cares about being in a relationship with us.
Because you said you don't go to hell if you just believe in Jesus and that's it.
Yeah, I guess Jesus took the punishment on the cross. So there is a punishment for sin, but Jesus died.
If I commit like 5,000 sins today and I go to hell, Or if I go to and I just believe in Jesus somehow, even though I'm an atheist right now, I just managed to somehow like trick my brain into believing in Jesus, then I just die and then go to heaven, right?
Yeah.
So where's the negative incentive of the sin then?
Well, yeah, just to kind of underpin what you're saying though. So hold on, if I can share my screen in a sec. I wonder if I can get it fit it on here. Let's see, will that fit? Maybe. Oh, sorry. Editing. Okay, this is the one. So I think this story is really helpful. So this is a story of what happened. We might have chatted about it at one point, but this is Jesus on the cross. And then they were actually next to Jesus on the cross when he died. Like, and historians will agree with that. You know, even a lot of new atheists would completely affirm Jesus' death on the cross. And, you know, next to him were two other men, both criminals, and they were led out with him to be executed. And when they came to the place called the Skull, kind of the crucifixion place, you know, there were two criminals either side, and Jesus is like, okay, chill out, you know, forgive them and so on. But what's really interesting is so one of the soldiers kind of mocks him and joins in. So if you look in verse 39 there, that little 39, one of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. But then the other criminal, if you look at verse 40, where the 40 is amazing. So he is your guy, Neil, that you're talking about, who's committed all these sins. And then last minute, this is him literally in the electric chair, turning around and saying, you know, don't you fear God? We're under the same sentence. We're punished justly. We're getting what we deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. And then he turns to Jesus. And this is the moment when he's being executed. It's obviously like a top criminal, like big time criminal. Literally possibly the last breath he ever utters. He goes, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And then what does Jesus say? Today you will be with me in paradise. So I just really want to back up what you're saying there, Neil, in terms of your diagnosis as being like exactly the claim, you know, that Jesus, there's a criminal death, you know, this is death row, worst criminal out there, who last minute goes, I believe in you, Jesus. Remember me. And Jesus goes, paradise. I mean, what do you make of that?
That makes me think sin and all of that is just a moot concept then.
Which I think is a brilliant question. And let's look at another story in the Bible, or another kind of discussion in the Bible, because I think the question you're asking is exactly the kind of question I'm asking, and I think Christians should ask. Because there's the point when one guy is basically explaining this kind of stuff, and then someone turns to him and says, shall we go on sinning so that forgiveness will increase? And what should we say? How do we respond to this situation? Sorry, I'll just pull it up. I'll share my screen. Sorry to be a bit long-winded on the share screen, but I think it helps us be kind of, not just talking about Alexi's ideas or Andrew's ideas, but we're kind of rooted into the OG, so to speak. Let's get this up. I might just have to share the internet page. Sorry, I can't format it. That's the one we want. So you can probably see that there. So what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? Literally what you're saying, Neil. Shall we just keep on sinning so that we can keep on being forgiven? Happy days. And then, but it's striking. What do you make of the reply? By no means, because we are those who have died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? When people got baptized, there's a big change that happened. He said we were buried with Jesus in baptism, in death, in order that we be raised to new life. So I guess the claim is, what do you make of this, lads? The claim seems to be somehow by believing in Jesus, we've just turned our lives around and we just don't sin because we don't want to. It's not who we are anymore. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's a nice way of like explaining it. Yeah, because we're forgiven by God's grace. I guess when, it's a good question, like if we sin more, do we get more of His grace by, the forgiveness? So it's a good way to look at it. But yeah, it reminds me that, it is like by faith that we're saved from believing in this as well. Yeah, they did this weird test with two groups of people, and the first group of people, the first question was like, no, they asked them all the question: do you believe you're a lucky person or an unlucky person? And yeah, they kind of divided them into whoever said, I'm lucky, and the others were unlucky. And then they told them the second part of the test is in this other room. And on the way to the room, there was like money on the floor, and like a really large majority of the people that thought they were lucky found the money, whereas a lot of the other people that were unlucky didn't even notice it. So I think it does remind me a bit of like the power of believing in something, or how it is like by faith where we'll see a difference of actually believing in something.
I don't know where in this paragraph it actually states that you can't just keep on sinning and there's going to be a repercussion for it, because I can't find it.
I guess there are, I guess what he says is, shall we go on sinning? Answer, by no means.
Yeah, but then where's the repercussion for it, and what's stopping you then?
And I kind of want to say, basically, there's nothing external stopping you. It's only something internal that stops you. And that thing that's internal is, we are those who have died to sin. So the claim that Christians make is basically, or the claim the Bible seems to be making is like, when we believe in Jesus, we've kind of been connected to Him, and like that starts to change us. It's kind of nuts, but like basically the claim is like our entire identity changes. And I'll just throw it out there, like I can notice this in my life in terms of not perfectly, but some things have changed. So like when I started becoming a Christian, I just didn't feel the need to like smoke drugs with my friends. Like I don't know why. I was like, to be honest, I'm going to go to heaven. I know the God of the universe. That is a pretty big high. I don't need the high of anything else. So it like really helped me like just not sin, not because like I had to follow these rules, otherwise I was going to get the chop. It was just because like I was a new person. So at the end it talks about we have a new life.
What if the criminal's not a Christian yet and they just want to commit some more crimes and then afterwards they find out?
Yeah, I guess that's probably the story of the criminal on the cross. That was, this day you're in paradise guy. This guy,
So you only start getting judged by the time you find out about Christianity, right?
No, everyone's subject to judgment.
I'd say that's when you realize it, if you understand it.
So basically, until that point where you're a Christian, until that point, you can just get away with anything.
What do you mean get away with?
Because once you're going to become a Christian, all of that is eliminated, right?
Totally. White's completely clean. So the image.
Sarcastic or not?
No, I'm not. I'll show you another. We'll look at another passage that I think really helps us here.
I don't know if
this is a good guess here. I might not get this right. Oh, here we are. Look at this. This was a bit of a lucky guess. I don't know the Bible that well, back to front, but look at this. this is what God says to people who are sinning, actually, his people who are kind of going off the rails. He says, come now, verse 18. Can you see that? Are you looking at that as well?
Yeah.
He says, come now, let us settle the matter. So this is God settling the matter. Though your sins are like scarlet, they will be white as snow. Though they are crimson, they'll be like wool. So God is basically saying, this is one of those prophecies Andrew was talking about earlier, a few hundred years before Jesus. I'm going to find a way to completely give you a blank slate, complete forgiveness, which is kind of nuts when you think about all the mess. Like I think of the mess in my life and all the stuff that I really deserve, more than a kick up the arse about. And yet it's completely blank check. I mean, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think I can't remember who said this, but someone spoke about how when God gets rid of our sin, he actually takes it away. So if I'm an angry person and I really struggle with that, it's not like, I just kind of run away from it. It's more like God actually takes that away. Like you can take away that anger. So it's quite cool to, think that he does take away the things that we shouldn't have to be pure and, have his characteristics more.
Is there any point in me debating how this is unfair? Because I think you already admitted it, right?
Yeah, I guess it is. I basically want to say Christianity is so unfair. Basically, it's Jesus died. He was perfect. And we get complete forgiveness. Like that is the most unfair swap. That's like he pays all the cost and gets none of the benefit, and we pay none of the none of the cost and we get all of the benefit. Like that is the worst deal you can imagine. That's how kind
will you agree with me that there's no negative incentive for being a criminal or an immoral person?
Yeah, I would say it's not an incentive externally, it's an internal change. So yeah, no incentive. It's like an internal change of your
internal change just
character.
means you're relying on their goodwill to not do whatever harm.
Yeah, well, actually, to throw it out another wacky level, Neil, I don't know what you make of this, but we as Christians, like the part of that section we were looking at before, talks about the kind of change that happens by that we have a completely new life.
Okay, please can we not go into that? Because there's so much already that I just want to I don't want to confuse it up before we finished on the previous things.
But yeah, I guess what I wanted to say was on the point of an incentive. And like, it's not just goodwill we're relying on. The Christian claim is that we actually are, can you see in verse 5 here, we've been united with Jesus. And basically that claim is like, God lives in us. So I wouldn't rely on my goodwill to not go around sinning. I would rely on God's goodwill in me, changing my character, which is a bit nuts. But I mean, what do you guys make of that?
That's obviously, you're not going to convince me of that. That's something that's you're not going to be able to prove to me using some psychological thing or something. So
yeah.
And Neil, can I ask you a question, mate? So like obviously as Christians we kind of get like the models or what we believe is wrong and right from the Bible, or how God explains things. How would you define or know what is okay and what isn't okay to do? Like what is it that would make an atheist draw the line and say, I don't know, a small lie is okay but killing someone isn't? Like how would you know what's okay and what isn't using like ethics and morals?
Whatever unnecessarily harms a sentient entity and doesn't have basically the overall benefit is exceeded by the suffering caused by it, then it would be immoral.
Would that suffering just have to be for you, or for, say, someone else that it affects as well?
Obviously, there's no rule book. So because we consider ourselves like animals, we are biologically just animals. So there will be psychopaths who don't use that same method of including other people's suffering into that equation. So they might not care if somebody else's suffering increases because of the benefit they're trying to achieve. So it would depend on the person's brain, but most of us are born with sort of hesitance to cause unnecessary suffering to other humans, at least, and animals generally. So it's a bit similar to the Christianity thing, because it relies on the goodwill of the person. But yeah, obviously there's no rules, and it's just statistical in the atheists, depending on the atheist, whether they're empathetic or not.
Yeah. Okay.
But then I don't see how you can say Christianity is any way superior to that.
Well, I mean, I wonder, maybe I'm a bit too pessimistic, but I kind of think when you do look at humanity, like when I look at myself, actually, I'm not that good. And actually, my desires aren't really to help others, and they're really to help myself. And I don't massively care about other people. And I suppose at least one difference would be that Christians, just again, I disagree that Christians rely on our own goodwill. I would say we rely on God's goodwill. And so as I'm confronted by the darkness inside of myself, I can look to a light that comes in from the outside. Whereas I think the atheist worldview looks at the darkness within itself. And I think it's just left with more darkness.
There is no such thing as darkness or light in the atheist worldview.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess I meant that metaphorically in terms of what you were saying about kind of benefits and kind of suffering, I suppose. So by darkness, I guess I would mean suffering and selfishness, and light.
You've already accepted that sin doesn't really mean much in the Bible, because you can just get away with causing suffering and then accepting Christianity later and getting over it all. And that sounds way worse than just having the biological and social morality.
But I suppose on the assumption, if you're assuming that there is, so I guess there's two things there, that that when we believe in Jesus, that makes no difference, because actually when we do believe in Jesus, it makes a massive difference.
Well, can you prove it?
Changes.
And if you
I
can't
actually
prove
think,
it, I can't take the word for it.
Well, I'd say it's not a scientific matter. It's impossible to prove one culture's more righteous than others. But Tom Holland would be a historian who's recently written a paper arguing that essentially a lot of the benefits that we might kind of inherit today in Western cultures are heavily kind of uniquely influenced by the effect of Christianity. But I wouldn't base
with that, because that's not your point.
Well, I suppose the point is that actually the only way to make any difference in the world positively, or the best way, I should say, maybe not the only way, but the best way to make a positive difference in the world is to let God change our characters when we believe in Jesus, which I think is the reason why there's been so much advancement in Christian cultures, because it's God who's been at work. Secondly, I'd say, I'm not quite sure without God, there's really much hope. Sorry?
Could I pause you for a second? Just explain that statement that you made about creating good in the world. You use something generic, like
Yeah,
good
I guess.
or
I
positive?
guess. Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is, as we, as I used that phrase from before, as we're united and kind of put together with Jesus, he kind of starts acting through humans.
So am I right that you just don't care about the suffering in the world then, because you just care about the Jesus thing?
Well, I guess I care about suffering because Jesus does, not because Alexi does, if that makes sense.
So inherently you've got no care whether or not suffering is really reduced or not.
Yeah, I don't think, like, at a really deep root, like, I just don't think, I think we like to have a nice time by ourselves, and we're not that fussed by other people. We are quite selfish, and I guess we've seen that in the coronavirus with people bulk buying for themselves and stockpiling. We've seen corruption, we've seen Black Lives Matter, we've seen all this sort of stuff that has revealed how much of a mess life is. Like, and I feel that in myself. Like, I just know that I want to have the last sausage at dinner. Like, I just do. I never want someone else to have the last sausage. Like, I might let them have it because of social pressure, but it's only when something from outside changes us. I guess that's, so I would want to be a little bit more pessimistic about our human nature. And I'd say the only good things that change are, I think, when Jesus has been at work in me, changing me.
So by what you've just said, you went against your own point that God changed your behavior or your intentions or how you think, because you still think how a normal person would.
I guess it's a both and. So it's like sometimes I think with Alexi first, and sometimes in small ways Jesus changes. So I guess, there might be an occasion, I think, when Jesus has allowed me to give the other sausage to someone else. The reality is, I'm not the like greatest. I don't want to claim that I'm a great human being for any reason, and that only Christians give money. But basically, I never had any charity direct debits before I became a Christian, and the only explanation I can have for setting up charity direct debits is like becoming a Christian. That's the only variable that changed. Now, I'm not saying that's only happens for Christians, but what I'm saying in my life, that's an example of one little area where I have changed, because I think only because of Jesus. And I suppose what Tom Holland argues in his influential book is like that is multiplied up massively across Western history, and really the Christian worldview is kind of the nub of progress in a lot of ways, but that's maybe a slightly different argument.
If your intentions and behavior are so minimally changed and the majority of it stays the same, and considering you're a pretty dedicated Christian and the vast majority of people aren't, then how can you assume that everybody is just going to stop committing sin because they've found Jesus? I don't think you can.
I don't think. Yeah, you go, Andrew. Sorry.
I don't think it's like anything significant within us that will make anyone be like, okay, wow, Andrew, Alexi, they're really cool. We need to stop sinning as well. It's, we believe that that's God's work to do that. And I think just to add on to what you were saying about, like the message being spread and all that, now because of the way technology is and all that, I know like quite a few people who went as missionaries to countries that have like never ever heard about God. Like we are called to spread the message as well, and we are called to like give people that chance to respond to it. So we should be going out to like countries that might have never heard about God or anything like that.
If the concept of Christ only came after about 2,000 years ago, how was it possible to discover Christ before?
That's a great question. I'll share my screen because I did have I hadn't given this masses of thought, but there was one thought that I did have. Cool, hold on, I'll just share it now. Hold on.
Actually, it might not even be relevant. It doesn't even matter, right? Because even if you tell me that they couldn't have, and you just admit that it's unfair, then we're back to the same place, because you don't really need to prove anything.
Well, what I would say is actually there are people who before 2000 before 0 AD, who in the Bible talk about having faith in God. So I'll just share. Let's see if I can share this now. Is that the right one?
There was like.
Ooh. Oh no, that isn't working. I don't know why that's not working for some reason. But hang on, let me just share it one more time. Can you see that? It says, consider Abraham.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a quote from Galatians, which is again a part of the Bible, and it talks about this guy. It's a very simple point, but it talks about this guy called Abraham. Have you guys come across Abraham before?
Yeah.
So he's this he is super ancient. He is like pre-Egyptian, ancient Egyptians. This is like 3000 BC. This is ages ago.
In Christianity, don't you have to believe in God as Jesus Christ? Or we have to believe through Jesus Christ?
Well, this is the interesting thing. So this is what he said. This is what the Bible says about Abraham. It says he believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Understand then that those who believe are children of Abraham, or in other words, in God's family. The scripture foresaw that God would justify the Gentiles or people from other countries than Israel. He would justify them by faith and announce the gospel, what we would define as Jesus, like death and resurrection, in advance to Abraham. All nations will be blessed through you. So those who have faith are blessed, along with Abraham, the man of faith. So I guess, this is a long way of, and kind of a specific way of saying Abraham, before knowing explicitly about Jesus' death and resurrection, believed God and was credited, he was blessed, and it's the same good news of going to heaven that Christians, they're part of the family of God. So that it does actually say, it's not just about believing explicitly in Jesus' death and resurrection, kind of exactly, which only happened afterwards, but actually believing in God's character and believing God is the kind of God.
Are Muslims going to Christian heaven then?
No.
Why not? Because they believe in God. And God's
they
character.
don't believe in this. They don't believe in this God, do they? They believe in a different God.
How do you know that? They do believe
Because
in Jesus and the same.
Basic Islamic doctrine denies Jesus died on the cross.
We're going to have to find this out, because the Muslims that I've talked to always believed that Jesus was one of the prophets prior to Muhammad.
They do, but they just believe they have a very different story. So yeah, we can look it up. The Quran says that Jesus did not die.
In your argument, you had to bring Jesus in. Why is it that for Abraham he doesn't have to bring Jesus into, or in order for him to the family of God, or whatever phrase you used, but then for them Jesus has to be part of it?
I guess it's a bit like so there's sort of God makes different promises through history, all because he's trying to point us to Jesus. If on day one of history,
what he said before, did he forget?
Sorry?
Did God forget what he said with Abraham?
I guess what he was saying, the point he was making with Abraham, I guess is a bit like a school teacher. There's a bit like a kind of classroom mentality. So, the teacher doesn't dive in with, did you guys ever do differentiation at school?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, well, Neil's there. It's a kind of complicated mathematical thing. But when the teacher explains differentiation, they don't just dive in with like, okay, dy dx, and then here's how it works. You should know it. Like, that's really complicated. They start off with like a few little pictures, and they try to explain what a curve looks like and which bit of the curve changes its angle and stuff. And in the same way, you could say that this is like a schoolmaster teaching Abraham, teaching God's people about what God is like through the little picture of Abraham. And this particular thing teaches us that it's by faith in God's character and God's mercy.
This paragraph disagrees with you.
Okay, go on. How come?
Because it says here, he believed God. Mm-hmm. It was credited to him as righteous, understanding that those who believe are children of Abraham. There is nothing there about any specifics that are needed.
Yeah, true. Actually, you're right. This paragraph itself doesn't tell you much more than like he believed God. It does believe that God blesses the nations, though. So all nations will be blessed through you, which I suppose is an act of generosity and charity, which gives us a hint of that. But in the actual famous story, do you guys know the famous story of Abraham, where he was about to kill his son, and then God provides a sheep for him instead?
Yeah, I think so.
So there's this famous story, the famous story about Abraham, which in some ways, would be on people's minds, a little bit like, I'm trying to think, if I said Batman, you would immediately think of the Joker. In the same way, if I said Abraham, you would immediately think of this moment when he was about to sacrifice his son, which is a really horrible thing. And God says, Abraham, don't do that, have a lamb instead. And basically what Abraham was doing there was having faith that God would stop him from sacrificing his son. So I guess that would be on people's minds a little bit. And that is why maybe when you say Abraham believed in God, we're thinking Abraham believed God would provide a sacrifice to save the lives of his family, which does bring us to Jesus a little bit more.
Can I make a simple argument from our original point of why did God wait until that specific year to bring Christ's message? And if according to this specific paragraph that just faith in God is needed, then doesn't it contradict the Bible, because you don't need any of that other stuff to go along with the faith in God?
Well, I guess it doesn't contradict, because I guess what we're saying is in those days before Jesus, God had slightly different ways of showing himself, and it's still a faith in God's mercy. But now, a faith in God's mercy, we don't need to look at Abraham and his son. We have Jesus that we can look at. And that's like the best way. But the thing is, we would never have made sense of Jesus without
Abraham himself.
Abraham.
Didn't need to look at Abraham. He just needed to believe in God.
Yeah, he believed he needed to believe in God of being a God who provides a sacrifice, which is a bit like Jesus. But I agree. I would say Abraham was almost like an illustration, like a teacher doing a diagram.
If that paragraph is true and anybody who believes is part of the blessed people who probably get into heaven, then what was the entire point of the Bible then? Because none of that is necessary then. You just need to put one line, believe in God.
I think it is necessary in a way, because if you look at like the Old Testament, which is before Jesus is coming, God had things before Jesus came. There was things that God wanted to do. There were so many prophecies that needed to be fulfilled, and people prophesied as well about Jesus coming. And I think that if God did just bring Jesus back and do everything really quick, there wouldn't be a way of understanding our mistakes or our sins, because everything would have been like set so quickly. So I think
Yeah.
there was still a plan back then, even when Jesus wasn't there yet.
Yeah, but sins don't really matter anyways, right? Because you can just believe in God at the end.
Well, you need to be forgiven for your sins, and it does say somewhere in the Bible that if we believe, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it does say that if we believe and we're Christians and we still sin, we're going to get judged even harder than someone else who didn't know the difference between right and wrong. Because as Christians, we're meant to know the difference between right and wrong. So we're meant to not sin anymore because we know that difference.
But if you don't know the difference because you haven't encountered Christianity and you sin, aren't you going to hell anyways?
Well, yeah, you'll still be judged for those sins.
Yeah, so then what was the actual point of why does it even matter then? Because it's the turning point is the Christianity part.
Yeah.
The sin seemed like such a minor role now.
It's still got a big role because Jesus had to die on the cross. I don't think we can say that's a minor thing.
But now the Jesus it doesn't even matter because of that paragraph you showed me.
But that still does matter. So we could actually look, if you like, we could look at the bits just before and after that section that we were looking at, and it's very clear that the guy writing it, Paul, is not trying to get us out of believing in Jesus' death and resurrection. What he's trying to do is make sense of the period before Jesus, a bit like we are now, and trying to say basically a kind of different or a slightly different way of understanding God's grace existed then.
So
because,
the rules,
died.
The rules for people before that point were different.
There was a slightly different set of promises but those promises were really just kind of like a school teacher doing a diagram, pointing towards Jesus. So I suppose we needed it to be different.
So God's
so that we could
and
understand
expectations
Jesus.
of people was different before that point, before Jesus.
Did you say God's expectations were different of people before Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm going to say that's not fair.
But I'm going to say Christianity is not fair. Like, it's not fair Jesus dying on a cross. So I don't know why. And life's not fair. What's fair? Like, life, I don't know anything where everyone has equal opportunity.
No, but if you say that it's not fair, then it's basically like an invisible force of nature that you can't measure or has no proof. And you're basically just working off the belief that there's going to be a certain set of consequences that come along with circumstance. Again, free will, when we're just going to pretend that doesn't we know that doesn't exist, but okay, even if that does exist, you're just still simply going to go through that certain set of series of events and then go to hell or heaven based on like circumstance now. And then none of that if being fair doesn't matter, then you can just punish or reward people based on anything. And therefore fairness should be an important value.
Wait, hold on. Say that again. I'm not quite sure if I followed everything there.
Okay, so if fairness is not important, then people can be rewarded or punished just based on circumstance. Then that means that it basically creates a immoral society because it doesn't depend on treating everybody the same. There's different rules for different people. Certain people are just lucky and then they just have the best life or in heaven or hell, whatever you believe. And then some people are just punished and it's all random and just chaotic.
I think, like what you said earlier, that it depends on circumstances. We're not judged by circumstances. We're judged by
But you said
God's authority.
you said those are different in judgment before Christ.
Well, yeah, things were different because it was before Jesus came.
The circumstance does play into it.
Circumstance. Well, yeah, in that way, but we're not judged by the circumstance we're put in. We're judged by God, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Of course, the circumstances would be different, but you're not judged by that.
If you don't encounter God or Christianity, then obviously that's your circumstance, and you're going to be treated very differently on that.
Well, yeah, I can see what you're saying. I'd maybe just push back on this little. As it seems like there are two things that are starting to come a little bit together that maybe, in my opinion, shouldn't be. So, I guess I want to say Christianity is unfair, but it's not unjust. So I don't think justice is the same as fairness.
What's the difference in the definition?
So I think the way we were talking about fairness was a kind of equality of opportunity to hear about Jesus. That was sort of what we were saying. But I wouldn't say that's unjust. So, for instance, I don't think it's unjust that there are mountains in Switzerland and there aren't any mountains in Manchester.
It's
unjust.
Right now, to go into heaven, you need to believe in Christ. But then 2,000 years ago, you did not need to believe in Christ to go to heaven. That's unjust.
Okay, well, can I say, I'd say that might not be unjust. So tell me why you think it's unjust.
Because that's two different sets of rules for different set of people.
Yeah, I could. So what I'd say is it's not two different sets of rules. I'd say it's two different ways of looking at the same rule, if that makes sense.
But then if I took that rule now, you already agree that Muslims wouldn't go to heaven, yet they follow the line of the logic that is required for people before 2,000 years ago to get into heaven. But then if you apply that logic now, then you're going to agree that Muslims aren't getting into heaven and Jews aren't getting into heaven.
Yeah, well, Muslims and other religions, they might say somebody might utter the sentence, I believe in God, but they don't mean the God of Abraham.
There was no God of Abraham when the God itself was from Abraham's perspective.
Well,
for Abraham, it was just God. And in that paragraph, it was simply the belief in God. It didn't have the same God Abraham believed in or whatever.
I think the reason, what changes with that now is that we live in a time where it's after Jesus came. So that's why we need to believe in Jesus as well. And we believe in Jesus as the Son of God. So if that was, so now living in the time after that, we believe in that as well. I don't see how a Christian can only believe in God and not believe in Jesus as the Son of God.
But then that means now you've got extra rules and different rules that did not exist before Jesus, and so it's unjust.
I wouldn't say it's extra rules, but certain things did change. So we still believe in the same God. It's still the same God in both before and after Christ, but certain things did change because of that. It would have been pointless if Christ came without anything changing. So certain things had to change. That's why he did come. If Christ came and nothing changed, then you could be like, what was the point of him coming in the first place?
If Christ is necessary to getting into heaven now, and there's other, let's say there's just some random religion and they happen to believe in Christ, but they also happen to believe in God, but they're not Christian, then are you saying that they can get into heaven?
What do you mean by believing in Christ? What would they believe?
Let's say they believed that Christ died on the cross and they're just some random religion, nothing to do with Christianity.
And what would they think that meant?
It doesn't matter because that's not part of. Okay, what do they need to think then?
Yeah. Basically, hold on. Give me 2 more seconds because I'll find the next bit. Just because it's much better to look at the actual Bible text than listen to my poorly remembered, half remembered bits. But this is what we need, right? Can I find it? Yes.
Basically, the word Christian, I think, is a way we identify ourselves as believing in what we believe. I'm pretty sure that's what the word means. That we're like the group of people that believe in Christ and in God. So I don't see what.
I believe the simple fact that there's a distinguishing point in time where rules change, and that relies on people knowing about Christ dying, then that it's so implicit to that line of logic that everybody after that point should know about that event. But then people don't.
But I would say again, like, why? Name one, like, what principle of fairness? Basically, you seem to have this assumption that somehow it's totally unfair and impossible that everyone can't have the same access to information about Jesus. But are
you denying that?
Well, I think at one level, I think we kind of know that there's a problem. Like, humans aren't perfect, and we know that there might be something else out there. So I think there's something there. But to be honest, like, I'm quite confused as to why it's so difficult to believe that people could have different access. Because, like, name one other thing in the world that everyone has access to.
If I go by your logic, where everything's just chaotic and random, and then you're just punishing random people.
Well, it's not random, is it?
It's
deliberate. It's deliberate, isn't it? Because God deliberately shows himself to these people at this time. It's not random.
So it is, because they were born at random in different parts of the world where they might not discover it, and then and at different times, and then
it might feel random.
To get punished or not.
Yeah, it might feel random. That's true. But I guess
how is that not random? You said it might feel random, but it should prove to me.
Well, if God, I guess the claim is if God's in control of everything, then nothing's random, kind of thing. But like, I take your point about there will be a number of people who don't have access to information about Jesus, and I personally think that's really sad, and that's why, like Andrew was saying, we have missionaries and we try and go around to share it as widely as possible. But I don't think that's a problem, because Christianity at its root, it's like a rescue. It's like, imagine we're all on a sinking ship and a few lifeboats came out. And then you're not going to say this is so unfair that we've only got half the ship onto lifeboats. What a ridiculous, and not get on the lifeboat. You'll just get on the lifeboat.
Why is there sinking ship in the beginning?
Well, that's the problem of sin and judgment, isn't it? In this story, in this kind of narrative.
If everyone just starts out with that as a baseline, then why is that baseline suffering?
Well, I guess you could say the baseline is a lovely ship when God makes the world perfectly.
No, because you said
then it goes wrong
on a
when we crash
ship to hell.
Yeah, because of sin, we go on a sinking ship to hell. Yeah, but God didn't make us sinful. That was that's humans who.
Yes, but if sinful is the baseline and hell is the result of that baseline, why is that the baseline?
Because God wants to rescue us.
God just a bit sadistic then.
But he's not. You go, Andrew.
We need consequences to learn, and I think that's something we can both agree on without being Christian or not. So if I was born and I was straight away saved, I would never understand, the depth of sin from what I've been saved from, if that makes sense. We understand like the depth of our sin and how impure the world is, and we learn from those consequences that we do need saving.
You only needed to be saved because God decided to punish you for something inherently you.
What do you mean?
You only needed to be saved because God decided, let's just make everybody sinful, and let's make the result of everybody being sinful is that they suffer forever in hell. and then you need saving for something that you just inherently are. And so everything is just seems sadistic and obviously
You're
unfair.
saying
We're not meant to be defined as sin. You said we're, you know, like it's who we are. We're not meant to be defined as sin as Christians, you know. You look in the Bible, it talks about the fruits of the Spirit, which is basically God's characteristics. We're meant to be defined by that, not by our natural nature or the way of the flesh. We're not meant to be defined by that.
But if
We're
you're
meant to be
born
defined by
anywhere
something else.
if you're born
What?
anywhere in the world, then you are naturally going to become sinful. And your nature is such that God just wants you to suffer because of it.
Yeah, I don't think he wants us to suffer because of that. He wants to save us from it. And I think,
Why does he punish it?
What?
Then why does he punish the nature of you and everyone?
Because that's not the way, that's not his way, and that's not what his plans were for us.
Then why are we born like that?
Well, I guess that will go back to the previous time we spoke about free will. You know, he didn't want us to be these like robots that could only do good, if that makes sense. You know, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between good and bad if you were born like that. You know, we're meant to have the ability to choose.
I don't think we need to get into the free will yet, but my point is that if it's just natural to be sinful, then why does God want that to be punished? And why is punishment the baseline? Because that, if he's just basically sending everybody to the slaughterhouse and then picking one or two of them out to be saved, then God is just an enormously sadistic person or entity.
Yeah, I guess I'd ask the question about this. I mean, it's not one or two, is it? It's countless people that he's picked out. You know, it's almost infinite people. Not entirely infinite, but, you know, countless, so many people that he's brought out that are made in his image to be in a wonderful relationship with him.
5/6 of the human population is non-Christian, so we're starting out with like 80% or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so 80% of people don't get picked out.
But I guess, let me ask you this question then. You know, when there's a ship that's crashed, and then the Coast Guard, you know, whatever. So say the government charter a massive ship for the army or something, or for the Navy, sorry, and that ship ends up sinking, and then the same government send out a bunch of lifeboats and rescue half the ship. You can't call that a sadistic government. You say that's a wonderful rescue, and it's terribly sad that half the people have lost their lives.
What's the government breeding program which makes you and then throws you into a slaughterhouse and then pulls you out? That's what this is like.
Well, I'd say wait, so God, say that again?
So God's the one creating your soul that I don't believe in, but I'm just going to play with it. So God creates your soul, sets you baseline as a sinner.
He doesn't do that when he creates. Do you remember when he created Adam and Eve? He created them perfectly in a relationship with him in the garden. I'm not gonna
talk about that because I can't use any sort of real world like evidence for that. But you're agreeing with me that the nature of humans is to sin. I think you were.
Since that moment, yeah, but it wasn't the first step. Do you see what I mean? So it wasn't like God did just drop people into the slaughterhouse.
That doesn't matter.
People into paradise.
First step or not.
I think it's not like an easy thing to like understand, and I'm not sure that I understand it fully as well. But God doesn't. Sorry.
And why do you believe in it if you don't understand it?
Because I believe by faith, just exactly the way that I can see you and I know you're real. That's how I believe in God, and I think that's what faith is. You know, like, sorry.
Distractions.
Yeah.
Too many screens.
You guys hear that?
Yeah, a little bit. Is it your laptop?
Yeah.
Oh, escape.
I'll probably have to go soon
Oh,
because
yeah, you said about this time. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I think what I was trying to say is that it's not like you can't really view God the way that reality does in a sense, because it is by faith that we're saved. You know, like if you're in a relationship with a girl and you know you have faith in each other and you believe you'll be together forever, there's no proof of that, you know, if that makes sense. It's faith. It's something that, you know, it's not written in, like, it, you can't really see it in a way, if that makes sense. So I think that's the way that God works. Like, he doesn't use the way we see reality. It is different. It is a different way, and that's why it is by faith.
But then why in reality, as our nature has gone made us sinful then?
I don't think he made us sinful.
Biologically.
I think that was our wrongdoing, you know. But
Yeah.
I will have to
God,
go there.
God creates us, right? Then how is it our wrongdoing?
I think this is the conversation for next time, boys.
Oh,
Yeah. Part 2 to be continued. But yeah.
Unless, Andrew, you've got something you want to say on that. But I just think if you need to get away, I don't want to hold you
Yeah,
back.
I have to go because I've got some stuff to do. But I do, yeah, that is a good, we can open that up next time because I think it'll go on for quite a while if we start discussing that. So yeah.
Oh, nice. I can hang on for another sort of 5-10 minutes or so. If you need to shoot off. Neil, do you want to hang about or do you need to jump off as well?
Yeah, I just want to get a little bit into that point at least.
Yeah, we'll have a little foretaste.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then we'll restart it when we get Andrew back on the next one. So we'll get a bit length into it, and then we'll rewind on the next one.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna bounce off, and I'll see you guys next time then.
See you, Andrew.
See you,
Nice
mate.
to see you guys again.
Yeah.
Bye,
Enjoy
guys.
your frappe.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is, I love these discussions. I think we really do, we're not talking around each other. I do think we're actually getting to big issues and big points. I think that's really important. It's good stuff. But yeah, did you want to go explain a bit more about what your thoughts were on that last point?
Yeah, so it seems like, this is a whole new topic in itself, but
Yeah.
a thing about Christians is always letting God be the creator of everything, including humans, but then when God wants to punish humans, now it's our own doing.
Yeah, to be honest, again, I actually kind of have to say here, like, I can't get my head around it, basically. There's something beautiful about it that I can intuitively see. So, like, when I watch what makes a good TV program, what makes a good story, what makes a good movie, it's like things start well, things go wrong, and then things are resolved at the end. And I would say that's like the basic plot of what's a nice story. What's a boring story? Things start well and nothing changes. Like, that's so dull. Now, I don't want to say that that's the only explanation. I'm sure God has so many other reasons. But I think there's something in that I can say, well, yes, it's a bump, like the story of the Bible, the story of Jesus' life, the story of the Bible is a bumpy ride. But ultimately it ends up in, like, you know, a relationship, beautiful, eternal life, resolution.
I disagree with that story analogy, because people aren't getting like endlessly like tortured in hell when things go wrong in a movie, but they are in the Christian concept.
I guess, you know, bad. Yeah, I agree. It's not perfect. It's not perfect, and you know, it's sad that people do go to do get punished and separated from God. But I suppose maybe, you know, you need that just in the same way that you need, when we went to get my fiance's engagement ring, kind of had to be polished up and stuff. It needs to do some work on it. And they wanted to show it to us. They put a black background in front of the diamond, and you could see the diamond all the more brightly against the black background. And I think maybe there's something in that, and just the same in stories a little bit, you know, you need something to go wrong in order for something to look beautiful and right at the end.
It's not very just to just let people just suffer so that there can be a black background for some sort of future hope.
I'd say it is. Yeah, what do you mean by just then? Why isn't that just?
Because it's arbitrary.
Why is it arbitrary?
Because it just happens that this group or set of people, you're just going to have to be the black background now. So yeah, get tortured in hell for eternity.
But if people deserve judgment for, you know, being selfish,
being selfish,
why is it unjust that people are punished for being selfish?
Being selfish is not. It's like, so things we talked about that matter, right? So sin and believing in Jesus or believing in God. Like, selfish doesn't even come into it.
Oh, sorry, I say sin. By selfish, I meant sinful. But I'd say selfishness is sinfulness. You know, it's the kind of root.
Whereas even that is like not part of whether you're going to get suffering in hell or not.
But isn't it part of it? So I guess the judge, you know, hell, which, you know, I guess sometimes we think of, particularly when you spend time in Manchester, you think of red devils with hot pokers poking you in things. You know, we don't really know what that is, but we know it's really bad. But it's not quite like maybe certain stories we think of, at least. It's something really bad, though, obviously. So yeah, I would say hell is the punishment, but it's the punishment for sin. And like, we are sinful. Don't you think that if, you know, that maybe it might feel a bit like a bit of an extreme punishment?
Why are we sinful, and why does that deserve punishment of hell? Because then it's putting everybody on the road to hell.
I guess it comes back to this kind of, in some ways, I don't know, but somehow God decided the best plan was kind of shaped like a Nike tick. It got worse before it got better. It went down before it swooshed up.
Is it just that the nature of people should be punished?
What do you mean by that?
The nature of people as they are born.
Then what do you mean the nature of people should be punished? As in,
yes. So everything that we do, like programmed to do biologically, like many of those things are sins.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of our selfishness taints all sorts of things. Yeah.
But is that selfishness if it's programmed in?
I guess, yeah, I'm not really sure who, you know, what do you mean by programmed?
I mean, so I'm going to just make a really simple like definition of what the programs of humans aim to do, which is survive as long as possible and reproduce.
Yeah, that sounds pretty selfish to me.
But then if that's how our biological programming is, and that is punishable, why are we programmed like that by God? God just want to cause maximum suffering. And
I guess, yeah. I mean, he obviously doesn't want to cause maximum suffering because, you know, he has this wonderful plan for people to be in heaven just by believing in Jesus. That's like wonderful.
There's literally like 5/6 of humanity that are punishable by his standard.
Or, well, yeah,
maximum, close to maximum.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of comes back to this in some ways. I don't know why God didn't just make everyone go to heaven. I guess it's that thing of like, you do need some contrast, don't you, in order to understand things. But I don't really know why God's plan. But I guess I'll push back this in terms of why does that matter? You know, as we're thinking about these questions, it's good to be intellectually, but I suppose the heart of the Christian claim is like, you know, life is short, and we don't have endless time to talk around the houses. God has come with a rescue plan, and actually, it's in some ways really we've met Jesus. We have this. Sorry.
Why do we need to be rescued from something? Why are we not just on a stable path or just some neutral or positive thing? Why are we on that negative thing that needs to be rescued? And why is God decided that?
Well, I can't tell you why, but I can tell you that we're on it.
But
do you know what I mean?
That is true.
Why is the ship sinking? I don't know.
If it is true that the ship is sinking, then you have to admit that God is unjust and wants unnecessary maximum suffering, basically, and is a sadistic entity.
But he doesn't want, because he's offering an escape. So he's offering an escape on a lifeboat.
If I sprinkle some little saving medicine on 100 different oh no, this is a bad example, but if I give some saving medicine to 100 different people who are going to die, and I just give them to one or two, because that's probably the real ratio of people who are going to go to the idea of heaven by Christianity's definition. But then if I just have one or two little pills to give to some people to save them, and I just want 98 of them to die, then and I made that scenario, I gave them all the disease and I put them all there, then I am by all definitions a sadistic entity who wants to cause maximum suffering or close to maximum, but then just have a little bit of fun here and there and just save a few people.
Well, I'd still, in some ways, we can't know what's on God's, if God really is there, we can't know what's behind his motivations. So you're kind of putting yourself there saying, God, you do realize you're an idiot. You've got a rubbish plan. You haven't thought this through. All I'm trying to say is there's a plausible other way of looking at that story, as actually God has created a vaccine for coronavirus. And he said, anyone believe in this person,
how useless of a
and you will be saved. And the irony is that people have got blinkers on, and we don't even want it. A good example would be a little bit like what Andrew was saying, those experiments where if I went on the street corner and I went up to people and said, if you say, Alexia, I believe in you, I'll give you a tenner, how many people would stop and take the tenner? No, they'd think I was a weirdo, or they'd be like, I'm too busy, I'm not interested. Or they'd say, I don't really trust you, I think you're just trying to mug me. And I think it's exactly the same with God, that this thing is open to everyone. He's generously opened his house and says, come on in. And so many people are saying, oh, I'm busy, I've got other things to do, sorry, I don't care. And that's really rude.
That's such a misrepresentative analogy, because God did not, he created the people going in, and he created them as such that they would reject his plan. And he created them as people.
He didn't, I suppose people become sinful ourselves. He created them in a state whereby they have the ability to become sinful. But it wasn't God kind of making people sinful in that way. I would say, isn't it?
Do you not agree that we have innate biological mechanisms which make us want to survive and reproduce?
Yeah, so I would say everyone is sinful, and we will sin. Yes, definitely. And God has created us. Why is that
punishable then? Why is the baseline just so awful?
I don't know why. I guess the question is though, do we know why? Do we need to know why? As we work out worldviews, do we need to know the why behind every worldview?
No, but if you can agree that it is the baseline,
fact.
If you agree that it is the baseline, then you're agreeing that God is sadistic and an evil entity.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't think it does entail that, does it? Because I suppose God is it's just a matter of saying, I don't know how you've defined evil. You've somehow come up. Where have you got your definition of evil from?
Evil. I'm just going to say that want to cause some suffering.
But God doesn't want anyone. Actually, the Bible says God doesn't want anyone to go to hell, but it just happens. In the same way that no judge wants everyone to be criminals, but he sentences people.
Are you saying that God's not held responsible for creating souls and people and the circumstance and the world and anything?
Of course he's overall responsible in charge, but he gives us a well, in his plan, he doesn't want people to turn away from him. He wants people to come towards him, but it is the case.
Why do you make him sinful then? That contradicts your point.
I guess I don't know why. I guess what I'm arguing for is not a complete understanding of why God did stuff. I can't know God's motivations. I'm not God. What I'm arguing for is that it's at least plausible that this isn't a completely like wacky out of this world plan. I would say it's a kind of, there's something very normal about this, insofar as it's a story where things start well, go wrong, end well. And ending well, I don't think is so controversial by saying, people from every country ever, thousands, millions of people, billions of people being in heaven, praising God. I think that is a good ending, even though a lot of people die along the way. And that's what happens in films. That's like Star Wars right there. That is Lord of the Rings right there. That is Harry Potter right there.
In the analogy, God's not pulling the strings on real entities who are going to experience suffering.
But God isn't pulling the strings on us either. We
God
are independent people.
How is he not? If he's creating us, then how is he not?
Well, I guess you could, to an extent, you could look at parents. They create their children, but they don't control their children in a complete way. They do have influence, but they don't control
the universe.
Sorry?
Parents don't create the universe.
Well, sure, but I guess all I'm arguing is it's at least plausible that as God made us, and he, and in the story of the Bible, he uses the analogy of parents and children. Turns out, just as in the way children there's tensions and difficulties with parents, guess what? Exactly the same with God. That is so normal, isn't it?
But parents aren't supernatural, and I don't think they have control of all the variables like God is supposed to have.
Yeah, so there is an element of mystery here. I'm not having a complete understanding, but I'm not trying to say my analogies are perfect. I'm never going to get my hand around an infinite God, but you can at least understand that there's a plausibility there, isn't there?
No, if you accept that God is a creator, then I don't think that, then you have to accept that God has created us on the path to hell, in a natural path.
He's certainly created some people, but I would say he does that in order to bring salvation.
But you just admitted that everybody's naturally sinful.
Yeah, so I guess what I want to say is what God is looking for is a beautiful family in heaven.
Then why has he made everyone sinful?
Because that needs to happen. That needs to happen. Just like in all these films, you need the suffering to bring the glory. And we're not sure why. I can't tell you every reason why, but all I can say is it's not a million miles away from our own lived experience. That childbirth. The Bible talks about childbirth as well as another example. Childbirth is the most painful thing a woman ever experiences, and yet it's also, at the end, it probably brings about one of the greatest joys for a lot of people. Obviously not for everyone, but for a lot of people, it's one of the greatest joys out there. Most painful thing on the way. So you could say, why is God so sadistic in creating childbirth? Well, that misses the point, doesn't it? I guess that would be.
I don't think.
Okay, well. In which case, I don't think we're going to make progress in this argument. I guess that's a point. That's a subjective understanding. I guess my conclusion would be childbirth is painful but worth it. But others might disagree, and I'll let you disagree if you want. I think I might need to go fairly soon.
Okay.
But I just guess to give us food for thought is really a question. But it's, do you need to know everything about something in order to kind of accept it as a best case approach? So I feel like one thing we've come back to a number of times has been, we don't know everything about God's plan for why he created the world like this. My question would be, do we know enough in the person of Jesus to actually make some progress, either positive or negative? But do we know enough about Jesus, even though we'll never understand God's plans or whether they're good plans, because it either doesn't exist or it's infinite and we can't get our head around it, so we'll never get there. But do we ever know enough just when we think of Jesus himself? That would be my question.
I think none of our argument is in any way related to whether or not we should believe it. That's a completely
okay
different thing.
that is okay. Maybe we'll come back to that then. But anyway, mate, let's draw stumps there. Let's draw stumps there, and we'll continue our discussion next week, I'm sure. But yeah, should we do a little wave goodbye moment?
Sure. All right. Yeah, nice debating you and Andrew today.
Yeah, really much enjoyed, and do comment whatever you'd want to, or point us in directions of further debates. We'd love to hear.
Yeah, let us know some
any other
topic ideas in the comments.
Sure. Quality. Great stuff.
I'm going to stop recording now, and Alexia, I'll talk to you after. Yeah.